What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the Neighborhood Podcast. One of the hosts of the podcast. My name is Kyle Dabro, and in today's segment, we're to go over the ongoing contract dispute between Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. So this has been a situation that has really been brewing over the last couple months, but the story itself has really gained a lot of traction within the last couple of weeks, and it's even gotten to a point where Lamar Jackson has even responded on social media to a claim of him possibly getting up to $250 million on a contract extension from the Ravens, where he replied, no, they didn't. So it really just shows at this point that the Ravens and Lamar Jackson seem to be at an impasse when it comes to his contract extension going into this year. So, Kevin, to kick this one to you, do you believe that the Ravens and Lamar Jackson are going to be able to reach a contract extension pretty soon here?
To be honest, it's like a loaded question. I feel that because of where both parties are right now, obviously we know that Lamar does not have an agent, and his mother is kind of leading the charge on negotiating those deals. And he kind of represents himself to a certain extent. So I feel like the lack of professionalism on his side is really hurting him and hindering his ability to really make some progressive negotiation. From what I'm understanding, what I've read, and what I've heard, Lamar is looking for a fully guaranteed contract similar to Deshaun Watson's. And I don't know if Baltimore is willing to provide that. Now, with Lamar Jackson over the last season, coming off of an injury, his play style being a very mobile quarterback, I don't know if Baltimore is willing to kind of invest over $250 million in fully guarantees. But we all know that without Lamar Jackson, the Ravens are pretty much shit out of luck. It showed last year the Ravens were 8-3 before Lamar got hurt, and they lost the rest of their games that season, and they missed the playoffs. It's not to say that Tyler Huntley didn't do a good enough job, but we all know that he is not Lamar. And when Lamar is on that field, this team is completely different. Despite the fact that they have no true number one receiver outside of Mark Andrews, despite the fact that they had gone through injuries prior to the season starting last year, they were poised to make a pretty good run from what it looked like in the AFC North, and it just plummeted the second he was injured. So, to really kind of answer that question, I'm gonna go with no until Lamar gets what he deserves and gets what he feels he rightfully deserves, should I say. I don't think that he is gonna sign that extension. I don't think there's gonna be any headway in this negotiation process. I mean, thankfully, Lamar's not being kind of rude about it. Lamar's not being cocky. He's still showing up to the preseason games. He's still showing up to camp. He's still communicating with his teammates, so you can't really bash him. He's kind of doing this as professional as possible. But at the end of the day, he is due up for an extension. He's one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. And of course, at the end of the day, that dynamic running ability that Lamar has, that capability to pull in a defense with his legs without even having to flick his wrist is dangerous in and of itself. So I'm going to say that this does not get resolved anytime soon until Baltimore is willing to negotiate how much fully guaranteed money they're willing to give.
I mean, I'm skeptical as well. The way that I see it is, I don't believe that Lamar and the Ravens are going to be able to come to some sort of agreement before the season. Apparently, they've been working on this for months, and there really hasn't been any sort of headway into getting close to getting an extension done. I believe even Lamar put a week one deadline by the time that they were trying to get this extension done, and I don't think that's going to be something that's going to happen within the next couple days or so. So I am skeptical to a pretty large extent. And the way that I see it is this: Lamar holds all the leverage in this case here. And Kevin, it's basically as you outlined. When you look to last year specifically, they had a great start, finishing 8-3 after I believe week 11. And then after he got hurt, they were non-existent and they just completely fell off the face of the earth when it came to their record, and they finished under 500, which is kind of amazing despite the fact that they had a great start. It really just kind of goes to show the impact that Lamar brings to that team. And the way that I looked at it from last year specifically, Lamar was single handedly carrying that team, not only just in the passing game, but in the ground game. There were multiple times last year where he led the team in rushing, not just passing, but in rushing as well. And to a large extent, he had to, because J.K. Dobbins went down with a torn ACL before the season started. And that put a lot of weight and a lot of pressure on Lamar's back. And he was capable of carrying the Ravens to a pretty viable spot in the AFC before he got hurt. And going into this year, the Ravens really didn't do any favors for him in free agency, in the draft, because when I look at the targets that he has to throw to, the top three wide receivers at his disposal are Rashad Bateman, Devin Duvernay, and Demarcus Robinson. I wouldn't say that, like, those are great targets to throw to. Obviously, you could maybe make the case that Demarcus Robinson's going to be one of the better targets simply just because of the association that he had with Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. But that doesn't mean it's going to necessarily translate over to Baltimore. So overall, the best target he has to throw to this year is Mark Andrews. And Mark Andrews is a solid tight end to throw to, but with the lack of weapons that he has at his disposal to throw to, granted they do get J.K. Dobbins back from injury, so that's a plus. It puts a lot of pressure on Lamar Jackson to get it done for Baltimore this year. And I think to a certain extent, I think Baltimore is kind of setting him up to fail just because of the lack of targets that he's going to be able to throw to this year. Overall, I think when it comes to this extension that he should get, I do believe that he should get top dollar and he should get a large portion of it guaranteed. But the lack of willingness for Baltimore to be able to pull the trigger on extending Lamar to essentially a Deshaun Watson type of contract here, it kind of leads me to believe that an extension is not going to get done anytime soon. And if one were to happen, it would be after the season. I don't believe it's going to happen before the season starts. So it really just kind of encapsulates the standoff between Lamar Jackson and the Ravens at this current point in time.